Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We are going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Simon. After your analysis of A Lot Like Birds and Bird Problems, I'd love to see one of Dwellings see it through. I hear some influences of Pez, Billy Talent, Hail the Sun, Artifacts Perio, and Dance Gavin Dance. Thank you for your work and have fun with these guys. Alright, let's get into this. I'm always excited to check out things that are related to Hail the Sun and Dance Gavin Dance, so this will be interesting. Let's dive into this and see what Dwellings is bringing to the table with See It Through. Very funky guitar line. Yeah, so it's like, what is it, 11 against 4? Yeah, just very math rocky. Love the grit on that vocal, that belt. Bringing in the lower ends. Those 16th notes. Yeah, and shifting off whether we accent the downbeat of the bar or the and of the downbeat. Interesting placement. Bass is center, guitar is left, vocals are center, drums are center. Our cymbals aren't anything right.
My entrails feel betrayed, makes my mind feel okay.
Really emotive bridge here.
There's a sense of it towards my trust. Do I even make a difference? For instance, sometimes I can't even operate. Cooperating with my chemicals. Something makes my entrails feel betrayed. They feel betrayed. They feel betrayed.
Yeah, tons of shifting patterns, really introducing a bunch of chaos into this. Really interesting dyad as well between our two guitars. They're tense, but they had flow. Hmm. Interesting track. I think it went on a lot longer than I expected, which is fascinating. You could probably even make an argument that it kind of meandered a bit there in the middle, but I was entirely enthralled with the emotional storytelling from all of the layers, the harmony, the chordal work, and the vocal delivery. Um, but when we snapped out of that and came back to a revisiting of the chorus, I think, that final 20 seconds or so, it really dawned on me. I was like, this song is it's the thing is too, it's only 5.5 minutes long. It's not a lengthy song, but it certainly felt that way. Hmm. All right, let's where do I start with this? Well, if we just break it down and get into it and look at how they go about crafting this sound, a lot of it is rhythmic layers, right? There is a melodic part of it. This is, I would classify as math rock. Math rock tends to join rhythmic and melodic intricacy into a single idea, and we do hear a lot of that in here. The guitars are frequently playing around with metric modulation, both in their changing of note lengths and the frequency of that. There's so many places where we'll have tuplets, which is putting multiple notes into a specific range. So triplets is 3 notes where one would normally go. But you can have any sort of uplet. You can put 5 notes where one goes, and you can nest them. You can 5 notes where three go into one, and like you can really get super mathy and complex. And I have seen some of that in math rock sheet music. It is bonkers and way above my pay grade of performance, especially sight reading. I might be able to do it from memory, you know, practice and practice muscle memory, but I don't think I'd ever be able to sight read something as complex as what I think probably went on in here. So we have tuplets and we have bouncing around between quarter notes and eighth notes and 16th notes and whole notes and half notes. It's just like the note frequencies are never the same, and that's what gives a lot of math rock its electricity, its energy, its drive. It's that it never sticks on one note length for very long. If it does, it's usually in a burst, like at the end of that one run when we get the diddle we get that handful of like 16th notes all in one pocket, and it's a single note too, which is also unusual. We'll talk about that in a second, but there's just always change happening on a rhythmic level. There's also change happening on a melodic level as well, a pitch level, where we don't really ever stay on a single note either. There is very little pedal note right. Actually, I don't think there's any pedal note writing in here. There's very little, even just staying on a note for more than, I don't know, a single repetition. You might hear the same note twice in a row, but it's always just moved away. And again, it's that energy. It's the moment. It's that momentum. The song always wants to change. This is just the cornerstone of math rock writing, and we see so many different styles of that in here, in the guitar work. I really like the bass work in here as well. A lot of the times we are hearing moving bass lines. There aren't too many places where the bass just gets to sit on a single note and just play a rhythm. The bass is always moving just like the guitars are. The drums are frequently doing interesting things. There's a melodic drumming style here. It doesn't lend itself completely into that melodic element, but it also isn't hyper focused on being just a rhythmic cornerstone, being that that metronome, the human metronome in the equation. There's always something really interesting going on as an embellishing idea or wrapping up the end of a phrase with a drum fill, and being really inventive, not just standard, we're going to do 16th notes from the snare down to the toms. Really inventive stuff in how they go about crafting their fills in here. Now, on top of that, we have the vocal. There's a lot of vocals in here. We have our lead vocalist, who I think is possibly our only vocalist, judging by the range that we saw from them and the timbre that they have. It feels like that was the vocals that we heard for all of the song. But they went and double and triple and quadruple tracked this thing. There's so many vocal lines in this track, and to me, it really amplifies the song. There's a complexity to the music underneath that the vocals match. And I think comparing this to Dance Gavin Dance in the context that we had back at the beginning of the video, yeah, I think that's a very appropriate context, because Dance Gavin Dance does a very similar thing both with the math rock concept but also with the way that they layer vocals. There are some harshes in here, but they're not overly used. When the cleans come in, we start off with one layer. We eventually bring in a second layer that runs counter and then leaves. We're left with just a single again. There's a part somewhere in the middle of the track, I think it's during the lengthy bridge section, where we have harmonized vocals on a single line. We have vocalizations, oohs or ahs or something, like two or three of those underneath the primary vocals, and then eventually we get another vocalist or another vocal line that shows up to run counter to our primary vocals, and provide counterpoint to that. And it's just a lot of vocal layers, and they're just painting so much texture into this. It is hyper complex. And the thing is too, is when we have these 4 or 5 vocal lines as well, the guitars are still doing their things, going a mile a minute, doing all their complex stuff as well. It is a lot of stuff to layer up compositionally and make sure everything works. It is a lot of stuff to layer up and produce to make sure that everything sounds well. Just a lot of heavy lifting on both the composition and production side of this, to ensure that this doesn't sound bad in any way. It's extremely palatable in many situations. That is, until it is not palatable by design, of course. There was one moment, and it really opened my eyes up to this, because I realized it was happening a lot. The dyad choice in here, our two guitars tend to play single note ideas. They play not polyphony, where they play multiple notes at a single time like a chord. A lot of it is playing one note at a time. So our dyad, or our chords are going to come from both guitars playing simultaneously, as well as the vocals. They're going to also be providing notes that fit in with whatever our key and chord are doing. The vocals tended to be rather harmonious, though, against whatever the key was. The guitars, not so much. And this created an interesting divide, an interesting clashing, a friction between our guitars and our vocals. Our vocals explored tension through chord theory. When they wanted to add a little bit of tension, a little bit of darkness, a little bit of weight to the song, they did so by appropriately going into a harmonious chord with darkness as a characteristic to it. And that's where some of the melancholic aspects of the track came from. The guitars did not. The guitars approached it in a vastly different way through dissonance. But you see, here's the interesting thing. The dissonance that the guitars introduce isn't one of strong tension. We're not talking about being a half step away. We're not talking about being in the wrong key. Well, I guess we are. I mean, that'd be the only way to do it. But it's so minute. What the two, I mean, it's also possible. So, like I've talked about this before, especially when we refer to solos and always bring up jazz solos. A soloist, a good soloist, will end up bringing notes from other keys into their solo to add spice. The key element of this is that unless you want the dissonance to be a part of your storytelling, you play the note and get off of it quickly. So you can use them as grace notes, you can use them as lead-in tones. There's a bunch of ways to use them, but as long as you don't hold on to them for multiple beats, you're going to get the spice of the sound without the tension it's going to introduce because it's rubbing against some of the other notes in the chord. I think that's what's happening here. But given how fast both of our guitarists are playing, and I think the frequency that they're pulling in these notes from outside of the key, and possibly, it's not even that one guitarist is pulling it outside the key, but they'll pull one, right? And then they'll work within the key, and then this one will pull one. But at the speed that they're playing, it's almost like a volleying back and forth of, grabbing a key or grabbing a note and tossing it out. And then the other one grabs a note, tosses it out. So it might only be a little mention of tension here. But then we have a little mention here and a little mention here. And suddenly that tension is part of the characteristic of the chord. You don't ever hear that raw dissonance, but you feel the tension it brings because it's so frequently being utilized, but quickly being discarded. That spice is becoming a bit overpowering. Not in a way that it disrupts the flavor profile of the food, but that it becomes a core element of the food. Almost like garlic, right? You can certainly have too much garlic, but there's a point where you taste the garlic and you can tell this is a garlicky dish, but it's not overpowering. It's what the dish calls for. And I think that's what the tension is doing here. There's a lot of it, but it's still at that point where it's not too much. And it colors the entire vibe. And we heard a lot of this in the bridge. I'd have to listen to it again to see if we had a lot of this leading up to that. Because like I mentioned, I kind of picked this up closer to the end of the track. But it was really fascinating because it was out of tune. It was dissonant. It was, a bit, I don't know, it just wasn't consonant. But it was. Everything worked. There wasn't really any point where I'm like, oh, that's the dissonant tone. That's where all that tension, there's the warble. It's not like with post-hardcore when they hit those really high, shrill, vibrating sounds. Wavy. I always hear dissonance as waves. I don't know if anyone else does. Um, but yeah, it's not like that. That is bringing attention to the tension. This is actively trying to sneak the tension underneath extremely palatable music, and it adds such a rich texture to that entire bridge. It was just gorgeous. Um, and I had to highlight that because it was just one of those moments. I was like, wow, that's good. That's good. Um, some weird timey stuff going on in here. Lots of fancy plan. I think that pretty much captures everything that I really wanted to get in depth on. Um, there's a lot going on in here, so if I miss something, let me know in the comments. Can't always get to everything with the tracks like this. Plus, I mean, like I said, I really got into the. Oh, yeah, let's talk about the emotion real quick. Then we'll hit the lyrics. And actually, this will flow nicely into that, right? What's the song saying thematically? What are the lyrics saying? And we can do all that big thing. So, like I mentioned, the song is kind of a chameleon. It felt brighter in the first, I don't know, so the first third of the track, I'd say. We did have the harsh vocals in there for a moment, but musically, it was still not hyper abrasive. It had a lot of brightness and energy and momentum to it. Um, but there was a tinge of something. Something we explore a lot in the middle third of the track when we bring in a lot of that tension, that darkness, but it sits underneath. This is I don't know, it's kind of like hiding it or possibly burying it might be another way to approach that, but there's a real sorrow in all of the vocal work. I think it doesn't betray what the guitars are doing, but I think it all works with this idea of hiding, of sneaking things in. The vocals are just extremely melancholic. They are. This whole section, there's just a, it's, well, first of all, it's the first time we really are in the lower range of our vocalist, and there's just this feeling of defeat. And normally anybody else sings like this, and it's not. But because we came from something that it's high effort, high energy, tons of projection and air pressure, um, and just getting these really high belts, right? And then we come down to this very calm, almost it's probably close to a speaking tone, very comfortable style of a range of singing. It almost feels like he's defeated. And when you mix that with the chordal shifts, which have moved away from those brighter mathy things to something that's well, first of all, we have the oohs and the ahs. So we don't have pure movement here. We do have these suspended tones that don't have energy or direction or momentum. Well, they have direction because we have the chordal movements, but they don't have the momentum to get through them quickly like the guitars do. There is there is something being weighed down here. The vocals do eventually break through, push back up to that higher range, and then we get the dual vocals. I don't know what was being said there. I don't know what many of the vocals here were at all. But we do have counterpoint in the vocal work, which can be a lot of things depending on what's being said. But we have all of this on top of the guitars, which are brighter, but carrying dissonance with them through that technique I was just talking about of bringing in a little bit of tension and leaving it and alternating who does that at the speed that they're doing it. And we come out of this though, and it's kind of a weird transition back to that brighter sound that we had at the beginning of the track without all of the vocal layers, without all that weight, where everything is moving forward. And that's what brings us to the end of the song. It was kind of an awkward transition into that, and then we were just there. And I don't know what that means, but I think it's fascinating to listen to the emotional journey of this track and kind of feel that darkness everywhere. Feel it try to break through a little bit more in the bridge, and then kind of get pushed back to the background again to finish the song up. I'm going to hit some lyrics here, and we'll wrap this up. Alright, so this song only has two ideas in it lyrically, which is fascinating because there's a lot of words. We have our chorus, which we start on. See it fall apart in your own hands, what you called this was romance, well, no more. So it seems to be about a romantic relationship that has fallen apart. They get to watch it be destroyed by their own actions, or possibly inactions, but it falls apart in their own hands. we do have a verse, which is italicized. Usually that means it's spoken word or maybe done by another person, but I don't remember any of that in this track. Um, but it seems to be about one person blaming another for the relationship falling apart. And particularly also, a key element seems to be that their child is not what they expected him to be, and that become they both have succumbed to vices because of this entire relationship. It seems both the romantic one and the familiar one. Then we hit the chorus again, and then the bridge, which is that cyclical element. It's the one cycle we have in the track that goes over and over and over. And interestingly, it's about, again, vices. Specifically in this case, drugs. I don't know if it's necessarily illegal drugs or medical drugs. It's interesting that it could be either one. It doesn't really lead to either indication, but it's always the good with the bad, right? I know this is a very American thing, but the drug commercials on the TV, they always have a side effect list that is 5 times as long as whatever they're trying to help with. There's always the ups and the downs, um, and quite often we hear about taking drugs to offset the bad stuff from other drugs to offset the bad stuff from other drugs. Um, I say we. I think I just mean me. I have too many relatives and know too many people who take, even young, take so many pills. And really, they only need the one, but everything else helps them to take the one. It's bonkers. Um, anyways, big derailment there. It says drugs. Do they even make a difference? For instance, sometimes I can't even operate corroborating with my chemicals, sometimes make my entrails feel betrayed, and in turn there's a sense of hate towards my drugs. Do they even make a difference? And we have this cycle over and over and over. There are minor changes. One time he says that it makes my mind feel okay, it keeps the bad thoughts at bay. These could be antidepressant drugs, but they could also be illegal drugs. Help clear the mind, right? But do they even make a difference? And we continue this idea over and over and over. And it's just the cycle of using controlled substances to help yourself get through the day. It's not necessarily making it totally easy. It's not totally fine. It's just better than without them, right? Interestingly, to wrap this song up, we come back to the chorus, see it fall apart in your hands. What you called this was romance. Well, no more. Very tragic track. About, at least for me, having this big monumental moment be the catalyst for arriving at a point in your life where you basically just have to get through day to day and there is nothing to look forward to. You just have to see it through, which is what the title of the track is. It's about trying to get through this point in time and trying to figure out the best way to do it and not having those answers currently. So, yeah, that lines up very well with the concept of brightness on top and darkness on the bottom, especially the melancholy in the middle, the cyclical element of that, which ties into the idea that day after day is the same battle, having to see it through again and again and again, just getting to the end of the day the best way you can. I don't know if there's enough. I talked about a lot in the musical breakdown that there's this element of hiding beneath, sneaking things in. I don't know if that's necessarily alluded on here. I think it's more just about discuss. Well, I mean, also, well, there's that one line. My brain just a million miles. Makes my mind feel okay, keeps the bad thoughts at bay. When he takes the drugs, the darkness gets pushed down. Maybe that's the point of it. And all these thoughts of, do the drugs even work? I sometimes, my body just doesn't work with them. You know, it says that my entrails feel betrayed when I take the drugs. This could be a spiral. Oh, it could be a spiral too, because it is, I think, alluding to antidepressants, and it's very easy to spiral. Just think of one bad thing and then just keep writing that down. And this is cyclical, like a spiral, and it is just all the negativity. Even, the drugs, he says, one time makes him feel okay, keeps the bad thoughts at bay, but that's an isolated element, almost like the brightness. This is the positives of doing this, getting drowned out by all the negatives, everything that doesn't work when he takes this medication. Yeah, I think there's a lot of resonance here with the music. Just really, and like I said, I was really connecting with it too. That bridge, I think, was very emotionally resonant. The music, the lyric, oh, I don't even know what the lyrics were. Just musically, it was affecting me. So they definitely hit on something really strong there. All right, those are my thoughts on Dwellings See It Through. Let me know what you thought of this one. Put your ideas, your comments, your thoughts, if you enjoyed it or not, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, all that down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here, has links for everything related to the channel. You can find my music, a link to the Discord, ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to continue exploring this week's theme of positive confusion, and we'll check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.